listening to Sam and Carl on PSH Radio. Voices of the Paranormal. Good evening, everybody, and good afternoon, obviously, if you're across the pond in Las Vegas. This is Sam. Unfortunately, Carl is unable to join me this evening because he's feeling unwell, but also, before I introduce our guest, there is a chat room available, guys, so if you click on the link, you should easily be able to sign in, and you can chat that way, send any questions in, vice versa. So, without further ado, I will introduce. We are doing an interview anyway, but
yeah.
So, without further ado, welcome, John.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me on.
No problem, and we've been wanting to do this interview for a little while, as you know. So.
Yeah, we were supposed to do it a little while back, and then things got bumped around, obviously.
Okay. So how have you been?
I've been good, keeping busy. I had just moved into a new house, so my girlfriend was doing all the work at the house and pretty much got everything in order. And then when this all hit, we were able to actually spend more time together to kind of finish it off. But yeah, we've been hanging in there like everybody else, just trying to get by.
Yeah, we've seen the posts from Vegas, and it looks very, very strange because it's like, in a scene out of The Walking Dead. Nobody about.
It's very much like that. Her and I, we took a drive down the Las Vegas Boulevard down the Strip, and we started from Fremont Street area and drove all the way down to the very south end of the Strip by like the MGM and everything, and It was very surreal to be driving down the street and to see just nobody out. I mean, there's a few locals, like people are walking around a lot more and riding their bicycles and things of that nature. But it's just really weird to just see nothing working and people aren't out there doing stuff. And it's just very, 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 very weird.
Yeah, because I guess it's like over here, it's not too bad in England, but I guess with such a city like Las Vegas, it's get up and go all the time. It's got to be super eerie and.
Yes, it's become very bizarre here because we're so used to the 24-hour lifestyle that now we've had to learn what other people have to do, which is not the 24-hour lifestyle. Like places that are normally open 24 hours a day are closed at like 8 or 9 o'clock now. And for us, we're just not used to that. So people who live here take a lot of that for granted that, everything, CVS is open and Walgreens is open and Walmart is open and everybody's open 24 hours. And now it's like, oh, that's not a thing anymore, at least for a few more months. And so it's been a little bit of an adjustment, but, I think everybody's pulling together pretty good.
Yeah, and I think it's more like, because it's more like, I found like, I don't know if it's the same with you, but you tend to talk to people more, because sometimes, like on social media, you ain't talking to a lot of people because you're either busy or working a lot, so now due to this, there is a little bit of silver lining because you're talking to people more.
Yes, absolutely. I literally started going through my telephone book and my Facebook contacts for people who I haven't actually spoken to on a phone in sometimes decades. And I was like, you know what? I know everybody's home. So let's just, it was nice to reconnect with some friends I haven't spoken to, and some of them in over 10 years. Like we chat online briefly, but not like just talk to on the phone like normal. Yeah,
so enough little lockdown talk for now. So if nobody knows who you are, would you like to give yourself a little introduction so people know who you are?
Well, my name is John Shaw. I'm originally from New York City, but now currently reside in Las Vegas. I moved to Las Vegas around 1995, and I came out here looking. I was maybe going to move here, maybe not. I have a couple of friends who lived here, and I just fell in love with the city immediately. And then over the years, my main job has been magic and circus sideshow performing. So that's been my main base. I've always had an interest in the paranormal or anything weird, especially stuff revolving around satanic and demonic activities and things of that nature. That was just for fun, though. I never really thought about making money off of it or doing it for like a job. And fast forward a bunch of years, and a friend of mine who worked at the museum with Zach, I always watched Ghost Adventures. Yeah. I've been watching it pretty much since it started. I started watching, there was that one show, Ghost Hunters, that came on. And I used to watch that, and I was like, oh, this is pretty neat that people are out there doing this. And so it was neat to see a TV show with that. Then I discovered Zach's show, and I was like, well, this guy is a little bit more interesting, and he was fun and different, and I thought that was really cool. So I started watching his show a bunch, and it was really neat. And then fast forward a bunch of years, a friend of mine is working at the museum, and she messaged me. I was out on tour with a show, and she messaged me. She's like, "Hey, do you know any Sideshow people who would want to perform at the museum?" And I was like, "Yeah, me." And she's like, "Really? You'd want to come off the road and do that?" And at the time, I was really looking to kind of like wind down my touring life and kind of like stay more, where I get to go home to my own bed every night instead of sleeping on a tour bus. And I was like, yeah, no, I think it would be a lot of fun. And I'd already been to the museum as a guest, and I just loved it. I was like, this is the coolest place I had seen, and I've been waiting for it to open for a while. And so she set up a meeting between Zach and I. I sent him all my promotional stuff and like resume, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff and videos. And he initially turned me down. And then he said, I don't think it's going to work. I'm going to try something else. I'm like, okay, great. So then I sent him some more stuff. I'm like, hey, listen, if you ever change your mind, I really think it would be great. I'd love to work with you. And he's like, okay. And then, I didn't hear from him. Then all of a sudden, I go back out on the road again. I'm on a tour. I come home. I'm home for a couple of days. And all of a sudden, I get an email from Zach. And he's like, hey, what are you doing? Can you come down right now? It was literally that fast. I went down. We talked. I described what I could do in the space that he wanted me to do it. I was like, I can do this and this and this. And he's like, okay, we'll go get a costume and let me know when you do that, and then we'll talk. I went and got a costume lined up that day, sent him pictures of everything I found, and he was like, okay, just start tomorrow. And it was literally that fast. So that was a neat thing. And then a few months into me working there, he came up to me and was like, hey, I'm shooting an episode of Ghost Adventures here in town. He's like, I know you know a lot about satanic stuff, and we have some satanic symbols in the room, and I would like you to come in and talk about them and explain to us about them and different things like that. And I was like, yeah, sure. So that started my my other aspect of life and working relationship with Zach, where he brought me in as pretty much like a satanic consultant / expert, however you want to say it. I don't think anybody's an expert in much of anything, but I know some stuff. And so I came in and started doing that. And now we just shot another episode that I'm going to be part of the new 4-part series that starts airing June 11th. I don't know which one of them I'm going to be on, but starting June 11th will be the 4-part miniseries from the lockdown during the quarantine at the museum. So you guys are going to see a lot of stuff that happened in the museum during the lockdown while they were there.
Great stuff. It's all right for guys, obviously, who are in the States who can watch that. We can't in the UK, so...
you guys don't have... there's no way to stream it? You guys...
No, we're not... Oh. Well, you're not supposed to stream it sometimes the way people stream it, but, Oh,
I gotcha. That's really weird. You would think with the way technology is, there would be some kind of way for everybody to see stuff.
Yeah. We do tend to watch it on YouTube, but afterwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. At least you can do it somehow.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, Americans, including myself, we tend to forget that everybody doesn't have access to everything. And just like we don't have access to certain shows that you guys have, and you guys don't, we just forget, and yeah. I'm guilty of doing the same thing. It's like, I was a huge Benny Hill fan when I was a kid. That was my first experience with British comedy. My father and my mom loved that show, and we used to watch it all the time. And I was just like, ooh, and then I discovered Monty Python and all that kind of great stuff. But it was it's just weird. Like we just don't think about that stuff anymore, especially because we're like, well, the internet exists. We can watch anything from anywhere.
Yeah. So we'll start off like a little bit now. So how did you get into like the magic side of your work?
Well, the magic stuff started when I was in kindergarten. I was in grade school, and they had a demonstration. During the course of our school year, they would have little demonstrations where somebody would come in and then get all the different grades together, and they would have somebody come in and either do a show or they would talk about stuff, things of that nature. When I was a little kid, there was a guy came in, and he was doing stuff about science, but he used magic tricks as a way to explain science and the way science works. And I was really blown away by the magic stuff, and I'm like, wow, this is really great. And then, I'd seen some birthday party clowns and birthday party magicians, and I was really enamored with magic. And as I got older, I bought a magic kit, a Blackstone magic kit from a local toy store, and I started playing with all the magic tricks, and I started doing them all, and of course made my parents watch me do really terrible magic for a lot, for many hours. They were very nice and supportive, and I bought more and more magic kits, and then I met a magician who did birthday parties and things. And I said, hey, I'm really into magic, and I really want to buy like real stuff. Like right now I have like a bunch of plastic tricks that I have in a magic kit. And he gave me the phone number of a gentleman in New York who sold magic out of his house. And that was my start into the magic realm. And it never stopped, still to this day. And I started performing magic. And then when I was about 10 years old, I went to a circus, and at the circus there was a side tent, and there was a sideshow in there, and they had the rubber girl, and they had a sword swallower and fire eater and a snake handler, had all the things, and I got to go up on stage, and I pulled the sword out of the sword swallower's mouth, and I never have forgotten that day or that image. I don't know who the gentleman is who did it, but I remember that event, and I pulled the sword out of his mouth, and he told me to hold the sword up high in the air, and everybody applauded. And I don't know what it was, but I know I loved it. And so then I wanted to learn how to do that kind of stuff. And then I spent the first thing I ever taught myself was how to eat fire, which was not the smartest thing to do. But I didn't. There was no internet, no books, I didn't know who to talk to, so I just was like, well, I guess if I watched it, I've seen people do it. I guess if you just hold your breath and put the torch in and pull it back out, you should be okay. And essentially that's what I did, and I burnt myself a bunch. And it was a really terrible idea, and I don't suggest it for anybody. And now, luckily, with the internet and the stuff like that, you can reach out to people who do this, who can teach you how to do it safely. And that would be my biggest suggestion. Anybody who's listening, do not try to teach yourself a lot of these things because they're very dangerous and you can get hurt. I learned a lot of things by trial and error, and there was a lot of error, and a lot of blood, and a lot of burns, and a lot of pain. And then, so that was my entertainment career, and I've traveled around the world now to many different countries and seen lots of great stuff. And now I'm sitting in Vegas now, living life here, working in the museum.
So because I know from watching TV shows and that magician ones, I know a lot of people get into it like you in kindergarten or anything like that, where they watch, and they're like, oh, can we, this is fascinating. So, and it's quite great that you've made a career out of it as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very hard life, and I've told this to lots of people. My biggest thing is, like, if you have a dream and you believe that this is something for you, and you're willing to suffer for that dream, which means you might be, eating a lot of ramen noodle soup, and things of that nature. Like you're not going to make a lot of money at the beginning. A lot of it is just getting out there and doing as many shows as you can. So you're going to not make a lot of money right away, but if you keep at it, and you have to be honest with yourself, whether or not you're any good at it. Because there's some people who have a great passion for this stuff, they're just not any good at it. And so therefore, it's going to be very hard to make a living doing something if you're not very good. You won't ever get opportunities to do bigger things and to do TV shows and stuff like that. And a lot of people are not honest with themselves, and the entertainment business is filled with these people. And I've had people, good friends of mine, who are like, "Hey, listen, that was good, but this was kind of not good, and you should try this." That's the thing is always being open to constructive criticism, not just people who say you suck, because anybody can say you suck, and that's not helpful. You have to, if it's like, well, I didn't like this, and this is why. Maybe you can try it like this. It might make it better. Or I didn't like, So those are the kinds of things that people, if you're going to try to help somebody, be constructive. Don't be destructive.
Yeah.
And but if you really believe in this stuff and you want to be an entertainer, there is no reason you can't be. There's lots of entertainers in the world who are not famous who make a very good living. I mean, I'm not famous really at all, and I've been on TV shows and I've gotten to travel around the world, and I make a very nice living doing exactly what I love to do. But I had to work very, very hard and a lot of hours that you don't get paid for, making my product, which is my show, better and constructing a look. I mean, if people have seen the photo of me, my image with my beard and all that stuff, it's all very well thought out. And I've created a thing where if you don't remember my name, that's fine, but you definitely remember my face. And that's kind of what I've crafted for myself.
So, just going on to continuing on to the magic. First in your career, did you go solely on your own, or did you team up with somebody?
When I first started, no, I just did I remember the first paid magic show I ever did. I got $20 for it, and it was a birthday party for one of my father's friends' kids, and I did like a half an hour show, and they gave me $20, and I was like ecstatic. I was like, "Ooh, this is amazing!" And and it was. I just did a lot of birthday parties. I started out doing a lot of birthday parties because that's how most magicians start. You got to start somewhere. So the best way to start learning how to perform and be a better performer, birthday parties are a great way to learn, because little kids are brutal, and they do not care about your feelings. And therefore, if you're not good, they're going to just say it. Yeah. And so it does teach you a lot of things. And it teaches you how to talk to people, and it makes you better at that kind of stuff. I was also very interested in haunted houses, like theatrical haunted houses. And I got into those when I was about 13 years old. There was one in New York that this guy ran, and I had been to it many times as a kid growing up. And eventually I just got up the guts one day to ask. I went to the place, and I loved it, and I was like, "Hey, who runs this place?" And they were like, "Well, that guy does." I went over and I introduced myself, and I was like, "How do you work here?" He was like, "Well, we don't pay anybody to work here." And I was like, "I don't care. I just want to do it." And he was like, "Okay, come tomorrow." And literally I showed up. They threw me in a costume, and they were like, "Okay, watch this guy do this one spot a couple of times, and then you're in." And that was my introduction into acting. So it was very much a trial by fire kind of thing, but it taught me a lot, because the one thing about working in a haunted house is you have a group about every 15 minutes. So you get to do your part over and over and over again, and you get to learn what works and what doesn't work. And so all those things combined by doing birthday parties, and then I went up to like doing like park and recreation shows, and then like private parties and corporate events, and then larger. And then I was able to build up as I made money. I invested it back into my business and bought better tricks, bigger tricks, illusions, and then expanded upon that. So it took many, many, many years for this to work for me. It was not easy. A lot of times it was very rough along the way, but in the long run, it has paid off. But, I definitely, a lot of struggle.
Yeah. So, of course, going in, when you first introduced yourself, you said you were always into the paranormal. So how did you get the first feeling of, paranormal's brilliant, I want to research it, things like that?
So when I was a little kid, my grandmother, she grew up in Queens, New York. And when I was a little kid, my grandmother, because both of my parents worked, my father had like 2 jobs, and my mom had a store that she ran. And so my parents were worked a lot. So my grandmother, she pretty much raised us a lot of the time. So when my sister and I, when we come home from school, my grandmother was always there. So she would, my grandmother was kind of a late night, like insomniac kind of person.
Yeah.
And she loved monster movies and all this kind of stuff. And then, but what she really was what I really loved about her, she would tell me ghost stories. But she would tell me ghost stories from when she was a little girl growing up in New York, and like how they moved into a house, and one of her brothers was out in the backyard and playing with a can of gasoline, and it exploded in it and actually killed him. And so they had back then they would have the wake in the house, so they would actually have the body in your actual house,
yeah.
And people would come to the house and view the body and do all the normal things. And that night they all went to bed, and they heard their family dog like kind of howling and stuff like that at night, and it was sitting in front of the coffin like the whole time during the wake. And then I remember she told me, she said the dog jumped up and licked her brother's face, and then just sat there like whimpering and stuff throughout the whole day. And they put the dog outside, and then at night they brought the dog back in, and it still would do that, and it just sat in front of the coffin. The next morning they woke up, the dog was dead. So that's,
Wow.
That's a pretty crazy story, especially when you're like 6-7 years old and your grandmother tells you this. And then she related other stories of things like that, when they moved into a new apartment in New York, and her father and herself and her two brothers were at the table. The one brother got up to go to the bathroom, and he was, gone for a little bit, and then they heard a door open to the upstairs room, and it sounded like someone was walking down the stairs, and then they would stop and walk back up the stairs. And her father calls out to the brother, said, "Hey, stop walking up and down the stairs, come back in here." And nobody answered. Well, her father got aggravated because he wouldn't answer him. And when they went back out, when they went out into the other hallway, looked up the stairs, nobody was there. And while they were looking at the stairs, the door was open. They heard footsteps go up. The door closed on its own. And they immediately moved out that night and never went back. So come to find out, the woman who owned the place previous to them hung herself upstairs in that particular room.
Wow. So
that kind of stuff really piqued my interest.
So have you personally ever lived in a haunted house, or?
I've never lived in a haunted house. As far as I have friends who have houses that they claim were haunted. Me personally, I never experienced anything while I was at their house. I've had some weird things happen to me over the years. When the grandmother I was just talking about, the day she died, it was very bizarre. I was at the hospital with her that afternoon, and I had work to do, so I had to leave and go get ready for a job interview. Not a job interview, but I was consulting for a band for doing like magic and stuff for them, for their act. And so I had to go home. I was like, "I'll see you tomorrow." I went home. I'm shaving. I'm getting ready. My phone rings. And now this is back when caller ID was a big thing, by the way. So this is going back a number of years. This is around 1999, 2000. And my phone rang, and the caller ID came up all zeros. And it only rang once. And I picked it up, and nothing was there. Within probably less than 30 seconds, the phone rang again, and then it was my sister, and she told me my grandmother had just passed. So that was a little bizarre. Stuff like that. Stuff like that has happened. I've stayed in some. I was staying at a hotel here in Vegas. I had been working on a cruise ship for about 2 years, and I came back from working on the ship. And while I was looking for an apartment, I rented like a little efficiency kind of room, so it has like a kitchen and all that kind of stuff in it. So I rented that for a little while until I could find a new apartment. And while I was in there, one night I saw what looked like an old woman walking through the bedroom crying, and it just kept repeating itself over and over and over again. It was very bizarre, but I wasn't sure if I was dreaming it or what was going on. But I experienced a lot of weird things in that particular place, and it went on and on for about 3 days. I mean, and I'm talking all day and all night. So I saw things during bright daytime hours It literally looked like it was people made out of glass. I could see all their features, but they were just standing there, just looking at me. And like, I would like, try to interact with them and stuff, and nothing ever happened. They would just kind of look at me and move back, and like if I would say something, I would see their heads turn and look at me again. Yeah. It was really weird, but I could never hear anything. So that was the downside, I guess you could say, to it.
So
but I wasn't really sure what that was.
So they were more residual than intelligent.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was weird because some of them, I saw many different things. The old woman was probably the one that I remember the most because that was the first one. Then there was other ones where it looked like, it was like a younger guy with like a baseball hat on, and he was looking at me like waving his hand to come towards him. And I would say stuff, and it looked like he was reacting to it, but I couldn't hear. I could see his mouth moving, but I couldn't hear anything. So that was quite frustrating and also really weird.
Interesting, now.
Yeah, so it's like stuff like that. It happened. Yeah. It was really bizarre, really weird. Then fast forward right before, probably about 2 years, about two and a half years before I met Zach, I had gotten really sick and I got pancreatitis, and I was in a hospital in Austin, Texas, of all places, because I was down there working on a show in Austin when I got really sick and I had to be rushed to the emergency room. And while I was in the hospital, I don't know if it could be written off as hallucinations. Don't know. But while I was in the hospital, I'm laying in the hospital room in bed, recovering from the stuff, and I'm on. They have me on some drugs and things of that nature, obviously for pain. And while I'm watching TV, Ghost Adventures comes on, oddly enough, and I'm watching the show, and then all of a sudden I see this thing crawling out of the television and into the room with me. It was almost like The Grudge or whatever you want to call it. It was very similar to that. And then I started. The doctor told me it was hallucinations because of some of the stuff that I was going through. So I just chalked it off to that. But I saw a lot of weird things. Once again, like severed heads floating through the air and things like that. So it was a pretty crazy time. But if I don't know 100% if that was paranormal, or if it was a mixture of the drugs mixed with the pain I was in and all that kind of stuff. Who knows? So that one I had to kind of write off. But it was very bizarre that it did mimic closely the other experience that I had about 4 years earlier.
Very interesting, that is. I love stories like
that. But in the museum, now I'm in one section of the museum. So the museum has like over 30 rooms that guests come through. And the section that I'm in is the P.T. Barnum circus section. So there's a whole circus section right before me, and then you come into my area, and it's like the freak show, sideshow section. And I talk about, some of the sideshow stuff, and I do a show, but I also talk about some of the paranormal events that happen in the house. And in my section, nothing ever it's very odd. Nothing ever happens to me directly. All of the paranormal activity that takes place always happens to the guests that are standing in front of me. And it's very bizarre, and we don't know why. Zach and I have talked about it, and he says it's like he's like, it seems like I'm like a weird antenna that I draw things in, but they only manifest themselves to people. So a lot of the stuff that happens to people in the room that I perform in is touching. It's almost every single day somebody will tell me that something's tapping or pulling on them, and it's always in the same spot in the rooms. In the room, there's like two areas where activity like always happens. And we attribute a lot of the activity to a little girl spirit that's been seen in that back half of the house quite a bit. So it's kind of weird. I've never seen her. Several of the guides have. Several guests have. They all describe the girl the exact same way. And it's really bizarre, but nothing. They never interact with me directly, but a lot of people have all told me the same thing. They feel like something tapping their feet, tapping their leg, and I've had people jump. If you go on Twitter, if you go onto the Haunted Museum's Twitter or even Zach's Twitter, he has video footage from in the room when you can see me performing, And while I'm performing, there's 4 people standing in front of me. While I'm performing, you see an orb of light come right out of the wall from behind this one gentleman, go right past his head. As it goes past his head, you see him jump back and grab the back of his head and react to it. Now, when I was there in the room, obviously I didn't see anything with my own eyes. I didn't see anything until we reviewed the video. But the gentleman who was there, a devout skeptic, didn't believe in ghosts, didn't believe in paranormal, didn't believe in afterlife, didn't believe in anything. The look on his face of shock and terror was very real, and he had a very different way of thinking of things because stuff happened to him for the rest of the house. He kept feeling something touching him or following him. So that was a very interesting evening.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more, guys, because I know a lot of questions in the chat room are coming about the Haunted Museum. We will be going more in depth on what we can on the museum later on. So, we know. So, how did you get into the satanic stuff? Researching it and things like that.
Well, I started my interest in Satanism happened when I was about 12 or 13 years old. I was at a bookstore, and I was going through the different books and looking up stuff, and I found Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible. And I was like, ooh, what's this about? And so I started reading it, and I was like, this is really interesting. And in the Satanic Bible, people can go on and look this up. If you go to the Church of Satan's website, a lot of this information is very easily accessible there. But the 9 satanic statements, and in those 9 satanic statements was a lot of things that I agreed with, because Satanism is not modern day Satanism, I should say, at least LaVeyan Satanism, is not based upon like sacrificing children and animals and things of this nature. That's for TV and movies. Now, with that being said, are there people out there who do that in the name of Satan? Absolutely. There's been widely publicized things, especially Norwegian death metal guys, going around killing band members and eating them and things of that nature, which is a true story. If you guys ever want to look that up, it's I forget the name of the band, but the singer of a band killed and ate one of his, I think the guitar player or something, because they had an argument over who was more satanic. It was very bizarre. But modern day Satanism really has nothing to do with those kinds of things. But I fell in love with LaVey's writings and how he portrayed Satanism and how it's not about all these scary, spooky, drinking blood and things of that nature, but it was more of a philosophy on how to live your life. And I was very much at a very young age, I was very attracted to what he said, because I was like, well, that's how I feel, and I was like, okay, well, so I bought that book, and then I read it, and then I bought, he had 2 other publications, The Satanic Witch and The Satanic Rituals. And so I bought those, and I read them, and I did all the stuff, and I just fell in love with the philosophy of it. And back then, no internet. So if you were a Satanist, you were kind of shrouded in quietness because you didn't really want to talk about it because people were all freaked out. And then, of course, during the 1980s, we had a big thing here in America called the Satanic Panic, they called it. And there was a gentleman called Geraldo Rivera who was a investigative reporter kind of guy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him over there or not, but he is one of those guys who, stirs up a lot of bullshit, basically. Is an easy way to say it. He's kind of like a National Enquirer except on television. And I mean, some of the stuff he does, I get what he's doing, but some of it's also for entertainment. And but people bought into if you listened to Metallica or Slayer or any of these bands, Kiss and all this stuff, were all satanic bands. And Ozzy Osbourne, told kids to kill themselves, and Judas Priest and all this stuff. And those of us who are into this stuff are actually, none of this stuff has anything to do with Satanism, but okay. It was a really weird thing, and it was a really hard time because my mom and dad, of course, freaked out, and they found a lot of the things that I had in my room and books, and they got very scared, and I tried sitting down and explaining it to them. But, I was a teenager, and they didn't care what I had to say. But that was my first involvement with Satanism.
So do you think, like, now, even now, Satanism's a bit, what's the word?
Misunderstood?
Yeah, misunderstood.
Oh, very, very much so, because you have a lot of people out in the world, and they just, like anything else, you're scared of what you don't know or you don't understand. People see a snake, and it can be a garter snake, which is a perfectly harmless snake that actually does more good than harm. But people see snakes, and they immediately look at snakes as if they're evil and they're bad and they're going to get me and all these kinds of things. And people are scared of them. They don't even know why half the time. And Satanism is very much like that. And I get it. There's a lot of imagery around Satanism that is, can be construed as evil and spooky and scary. And part of the fun is to do that. But it has nothing to do with, like, eating babies and killing animals. In fact, killing animals or anybody is highly frowned upon by not only society but also by Satanists. Like, Satanists don't believe in going around killing people, that kind of thing. That's just not a reality of life.
I've got to tell this to you, John, from Carl. He says to mention that he's been to the Satanic Museum in Salem and he had to leave because he was feeling unwell and he felt like someone was behind him.
Well, I mean, that could be true. In Salem, Massachusetts, they're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've been to Salem, Massachusetts several times. That place is a very weird place. The whole town, because of the history, there's some really deep, crazy history that has happened in that town. It's really famous, obviously, for the witches and stuff like that. And by the way, those witches have nothing to do with Satanism whatsoever. That is a completely different belief system compared. Now, there are satanic witches, but the witches that were like persecuted during that time have nothing to do with Satanism, as far as I know. Now, I have friends who live in Salem who are satanic witches, and I have friends who live in Salem who are regular witches. And, I don't have a problem with anybody. My thing is, like, you do what you want as long as you don't infringe upon myself or other people, and you don't mess with their lives. You can do what you want. I don't care what you believe in. I have born-again Christian friends. I have Buddhist friends. I have Jewish friends, Catholic friends. I have all kinds of friends. I don't begrudge anybody's belief system at all on any level. It's like you do whatever makes you happy, as long as you don't tell me that I'm wrong, what I'm doing is wrong, and you don't try to hurt me and I don't try to hurt you. I'm fine with whatever. Don't care. But the stuff in Salem is I've been to some really weird places. I went to an old jail that was in Salem, and it had been defunct. It's now, I believe it's like office building now, but at the time they were trying to sell it, and I got to go on a tour of this whole building because a friend of mine was interested in buying it and turning it into a crime museum, because obviously being an old jail, it's a perfect place for a crime museum, and that deal never worked out. But we walked through there, and it was it had some really powerful things going on in there. I mean, this is a place that had been around long enough that pirates were actually executed in the outside area of this jail. That's how old it was. And a lot of people don't realize the majority of the history, a lot of the stuff that happened there, even though the witches thing is the most famous, that's not actually, most of Salem, it was known for a lot of piracy. And a lot of pirates spent a lot of time there, all kinds of stuff. And but a lot of people wash that away because obviously the witches thing is, they can have more fun with it, and they can, there's easier to make things about it.
So, with you being a sideshow performer / magician, which other places have you worked at?
Excuse me?
Sorry. With you being a sideshow performer and magician, what other places have you worked at? I've performed, I worked for a cruise line called Norwegian Cruise Lines. I was in a show called the Illusionarium. I was part of that show. And that we traveled we started in Bremerhaven, Germany, is where the ship was built. And then we sailed from there to Rotterdam and then to Southampton. And we were in Southampton for a week, which is why I was talking to you earlier. I was telling you the only place in England I've ever been is Southampton. And I really enjoyed it because we were there for a week, so I got to walk around and take
hundreds and hundreds of pictures of all the great architecture that I love, old buildings and things. And then we sailed from there. We did the transatlantic crossing and sailed to New York City. And then we went down to Florida and then down to the Bahamas, and then we did the Eastern Caribbean. And I was on that ship for about 2 years, and we did the Eastern Caribbean. I did over 600 and something performances, I would say. Probably about 600-700 performances on that ship in that 2-year period. I've been very fortunate to be able to perform in China several times. In Shanghai, we were in Shanghai doing a show for 3 months, and that was great. I loved it there. And then I got to perform in Beijing just about a year and a half ago. Yeah, about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. We were in Beijing and performed for state officials and stuff like that. It was a big magic-y kind of thing. God, I'm trying to think where else. I've been to Australia. It's taken me to Australia. It's taking me to Germany, and every state in the United States except for Hawaii is the only place I've never been so far.
There we go. Loads of places.
Oh, did I lose you? I couldn't tell. Huh?
Loads of places then.
I'm sorry, I can't hear it. You're breaking up a little bit.
So I said loads of places then.
Where's a place?
Loads. So you've been to many. So basically, you've been to many places then in your line of work.
Yes. Yeah, I've been to multiple cities in almost every single state, obviously, other than Hawaii, like I said. Yeah. That's the last one I have left. And I've been to, I've forgotten how many countries now at this point, but quite a few.
So before we move on to the last bit of the show, would you like to let everybody know, because you are a host of your own radio show, is it, After Dark?
Yeah, I have a podcast that we shoot here live in Las Vegas. Generally, it's every Tuesday. Right now, we're on hiatus because of the whole pandemic thing. I'm not comfortable, nor are a lot of guests comfortable. And plus, a lot of people aren't coming through the city anymore, aren't comfortable with coming into a studio and doing a live show anymore. But my show is called After Dark with John Shaw, and you can find us on YouTube. If you looked up After Dark with John Shaw, you can find the previous shows. We've been going for a little while. We started producing. We were getting a good foot going, and then this whole thing happened. But all my shows are on YouTube, and then we also have a Facebook page, After Dark with John Shaw, and you can also watch the videos on there and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we do it once we kick back in again, it'll be every Tuesday again, and we have a wide variety of guests. I was very fortunate to have Jay Wasley from Ghost Adventures came on. For those of you guys who might not be familiar with Jay, he is the main sound engineer and tech guy for the Ghost Adventures crew, and he also does investigations on the show as well. Those of you guys who are familiar with the show know who I'm talking about. But he was really great, and he came on the show and talked about how he got into it and how he started and his whole background. So if you guys go onto the YouTube channel or the Facebook page, you can actually watch these shows. And then I've had other people from the adult film industry. I've had people Facebook and or I should say not Facebook, but internet influencers, I guess you could say. I've had a few of those on, different people like that, other performers, sports betting people. So my show is a wide variety of all kinds of people of things that I just find interesting. Yeah. And because I'm interested in so many different things, I like to make friends with all these people because they have so much to share. And I'm like, man, I think this is really cool. And maybe I can introduce other people who maybe never knew about to these things that I think are fun. And it seems to be working pretty good. People really liked it. So hopefully once this is over, we can go back to shooting our shows again.
Great stuff. So there you go, guys. I shall post the links and all that later on and post it on social media for you, John. So we'll move on to the museum now. So a question came in pretty earlier in the chat room, and of course you said that you you haven't really experienced any strange things in the part of the museum you work at. But have you ever experienced any strange things in any other part of the museum?
So the things that happen in the museum don't necessarily happen to me. So when I see what I see happening is people reacting to things happening to them. That happens in front of me on a daily basis, and so I do little experiments every single day in the museum, in the section of the museum that I'm in. I'll do little experiments where usually the activity will take place right as I'm about to talk about it. So I kind of like, right as I'm about to talk about this little girl that has been seen and does a lot of things, I hesitate for just like a second or so just to kind of look around the room to see if somebody, there's like two areas of the room that I stand in. And I don't tell people beforehand about this. That's why this is the experiment that I do every day, is I do it for that reason, for very good purposes, so that nobody has anything in their head going, oh, I felt something, because if I say, oh, it happens right here, and they're like, oh my God, I was just feeling something. That I try to prevent those things from happening by not talking about it. So I go on and I talk about things, and then I wait to see if people are like making a weird face. And I can usually tell, because you'll see a lot of times people will like jerk back, and then they'll look down at the floor, and then I'm like, and I'll stop in the middle of my talk and I'll be like, hey, are you okay? And they're like, yeah, I'm fine. And it's like, I know they're not fine. I know something happened, but I'm trying to get them to talk about it because I don't want to say what I already know. And that's the whole thing, is you don't want to say it because I don't want to pollute somebody's opinion or try to, put something into their head that didn't happen. So I try to ask them, I'm like, what happened to you? What did you just react to? And then they'll usually be like, well, I felt like something just grabbed my leg, or something grabbed my foot, or something pulled on my shirt. These are all things that happen daily. Yeah. And because they happen almost always in these two spots in the room, you can almost set your watch to it. Now, with that being said, there's a lot of things happen to the guides. The guides probably, I would say, get the most interaction with different things. We had one girl who worked at the museum who's a great tour guide, and she was very dismissive of a lot of stuff because nothing ever happened to her. And one day I'm upstairs before we opened. I'm upstairs in the men's bathroom, putting on my show makeup and getting dressed. And she was talking to me, and she's like, all right, I'll see you later. And she walks away, and like within seconds, I hear this scream. She comes running back over, and she's like, holy shit, I just saw something. Yeah. And I was like, what happened? She was like, I just walked around the corner from talking to you, and literally I saw a human form, but in a shadow, walking very quickly towards her, so much so that she jumped out of the way thinking that it was somebody running in the hallway. And then when she turned to look, there was nothing there. And that really like weirded her out pretty good. And then a few months later, she had in Peggy's room, we have this doll Peggy that's reportedly is a demonically possessed doll. And we have a spirit box set up in that room that just plays all day. And she went and turned it on earlier in the day, and while the first group was coming through the house, she let them in the room. She steps out of the room so people can sit in there and do their thing. They're in the room by themselves, and then all of a sudden the spirit box comes flying off the shelf. Now, we went back and reviewed the footage, which we have night vision footage of every room. We have security footage in the entire house for this particular purpose. Yeah. And in the footage, the great thing about it, and this is posted online, you can actually go and look this up on the Haunted Museum's like Twitter page or on Facebook and all that stuff, and you can very clearly see an orb of light come right out of Peggy's, right, you can see the doll, and right out of her case comes this little ball of light, and the spirit box doesn't like fall off and fall on in front of it, it flies off of the shelf directly in front of her. So really, really neat stuff like that happens on a daily. I mean, we have people pass out, vomit, uncontrollable crying, all kinds of things.
Yeah, speaking to you earlier, John, I've been to the museum a few times, and yeah.
Yeah, it affects. I mean, I've had friends who come there who, especially magician friends of mine, who don't believe in anything. They're like, this is all bullshit. There's no such thing as ghosts, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay. I understand how you feel this way because nothing's ever happened to you. I totally get it. I felt that way for a very long time until I started noticing or having things that just didn't make any sense. And it's hard to explain every single thing away. And I try to explain everything away as just normal things or like, it's something that's not paranormal. It's just, I just have to figure out what it is. And I would say 99% of things that happen in the museum a lot of them are just normal things, or people are imagining something. A lot of times people's friends are messing with them and they'll be like, oh yeah, I got touched. Then we go back through the security footage and we see their friend tapping on them. Things like that. That happens a lot. But I'll tell you, there is, we do 200-300 people through a day, and in October it's even more than that. And I'll tell you, man, the amount of people that report the same kind of thing happening in the same place every single day, it kind of becomes super hard to write that off as coincidental.
Yeah.
It just becomes something where it's like, I can't, that's not coincidence. A ball of light coming out of a wall, you can write it off, oh, maybe it was a reflection or something. But I'm in that room every day, 8, 9, 10 hours a day sometimes. And I've watched security footage on that room. There has never been a single reflection of a ball of light ever. And I've watched the footage for hours. I even watched the footage from that one particular gentleman's experience. I watched it for 2 hours before and 2 hours after. It never replicated itself. So if it was something that was in the room that it was like a reflection from something, it would happen more than once. And also, how can you explain at that exact time? Like, the ball came out of the wall, the orb of light came out of the wall at that exact time past this particular individual, that when he just happened to say that he felt something touch him, like, it doesn't make any sense.
I totally agree with you on that one, Jan.
Yeah, I mean, I try to explain a lot of things away. I always lean towards the scientific end of things. I'm like, all right, how can... this is what you experience. Okay, because I've had people go, oh my God, I'm feeling cold air on me. Meanwhile, they're standing underneath an air conditioning duct that's in the museum. And because it's so dark, they couldn't see it. And I'm like, well, actually, right above you is an air conditioning duct that probably just turned on. And then they're like, they put their hand up. They're like, oh yeah, there it is. So, I try to be very reasonable, but I also don't downplay anybody's experiences, because just because I didn't feel it doesn't mean it didn't happen. But I try to, come up with as many logical answers as I can. And when I run out of all those logical answers, then you kind of have to start to look towards other possibilities. So you have to be open to all kinds of things. If you're hardcore about, like, this is all bullshit, it never happens, it can't happen. Well, nobody probably thought a pandemic would shut the world down either, but it has.
Yeah. So, are you allowed to say which parts of if your areas...
I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Are you allowed to say the most active parts in your room, or...
So in the house, there are certain parts of the house that are definitely, from the tour guide's perspective, the areas that are more prevalent to activity. One of them, and Zach has said this multiple times, is the Dybbuk box room. The Dybbuk box probably is one of the rooms where most unusual things with guests take place on a daily basis. We've had and we even had one of our tour guides. She had her face physically pushed into the glass case that's around the Dybbuk box while she was giving a tour. So it wasn't like she was like just standing around doing nothing. She was giving a tour, and then all of a sudden, boom, you see her head get slammed into the case, and she turns around to the guy behind her, and we watched the video footage, and clearly, and this is online as well, you guys can actually go look this up. Zach posted it, and you can clearly see she's just standing there, and then all of a sudden, boom, she just dives into it face first, which, I mean, she's not a kid, she's not looking for attention. This is a regular woman who just happened to be giving a tour, and in the middle of the tour, this all happened to her. And she was very freaked out by that, and had to sit down for a little bit before she can give a tour again.
Yeah, when we have a friend who goes to the museum quite a lot, and every time she goes in the Dybbuk box room, she gets scratched.
Yes, that the Dybbuk box is really known. Scratching is very scratching. People feel very nauseous in there. We've had people have really bad panic attacks in there. A lot of things. We've had people pass out in there as well, or they go in and they're like, I don't really feel really good. And we're like, okay, why don't you just step out for a second? And they step out and boom, they collapse. So lots of stuff. Yeah, the Dybbuk box room gets a lot of things. I'm trying to think of like some of the other areas right by the basement stairs, which the general public is not allowed to go into the basement. There's only a few people who go in the basement. Obviously, Zach is one of them. But a lot of weird things apparently took place in that basement. And if you look up the history behind the house itself, the house was built in 1938 by the Wangert family, and supposedly there was satanic rituals taking place in that basement. I don't know 100% if that's true. This is just a story that was relayed to us via one of the people who lived there at one point. So, but a lot of people feel a lot of weird. The basement door has closed on its own multiple times, opened and closed during the course of a regular day for no particular reason. Like the management would go down and be like, okay, we're going to close the door because there's some light switches down there that operate things. So they go down there, turn stuff on, close the door, and then on the security footage, they'll be like, oh, the door is open. Who went downstairs? Nobody went downstairs, and then there is a video of it where you see the door actually close on its own, and nobody's downstairs. So the downstairs area has got a lot of stuff. The Kevorkian room, we've had some very interesting things take place, not in the room with the van, oddly enough, but in the room just before you get into where the van is. So that's, the whole place has a lot of activity, and everybody responds to it differently. Some people go through and nothing happens. Yeah. And they're just like, oh, and then of course they give they'll write something and be like, oh, this is all just bullshit. Nothing happened to me. And I'm like, okay, well, it's not like a switch you turn on. Like, they're not here to do a show for you. Yeah. It's not a haunted house where you pay to go in and people jump out of the wall at you. That's like, that's not what it is. It's like things happen when they happen. You can't, if you could set a timer to it, that would be fantastic, but you can't. So because we don't really fully understand everything. So it's things happen when they happen, and you either can catch it or you can't. We just don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's because I think I've been to the museum 4 times, and I remember the first time I went, felt nothing, and then it's the kind of. I speak to a lot of people who have been to the museum as well. They say the more you go, then the more it affects you.
Huh. Well, that might make sense with a lot of the guides, because a lot of the, especially in Peggy's room, because we have the spirit box right there. Peggy sometimes is very vocal with specific tour guides where they will call them by name, and then some of the times the girls will get like, hi, and then say the name of the tour guide, and then other times it'll say their name and call them a bitch, or sometimes a lot more serious curse words and stuff like that. So it's really weird. It's one of those things. Then of course I have friends who are like, oh well, somebody's just there talking into it. I'm like, I can tell you 100% for a fact there is nobody sitting at the museum with a little walkie-talkie talking through that box. That's just, I understand how you would think that it would make sense to do that, but this is not a theatrical haunted house. This is a house that has a lot of some serious, very heavy duty paranormal artifacts in the house. And with that comes attachments and things of that nature, and the energy that travels with these objects. And just being my own experience, I've just seen too many things for it to be a coincidence. I've seen just way too many things happening to other people. And when people are explaining the same thing over and over and over again to you, where it's happening in the same spot on the same part of their body, and these people don't know each other, so it just doesn't make any sense. It just makes it like impossible. Here's an interesting story. So, like I said, like a lot of stuff doesn't happen to me. So this is a weird thing that did happen. I kind of forgot about it because I don't talk about it a lot, but So when I shot my very first episode of Ghost Adventures, which is the Gates of Hell episode, where I go in and we go into this one attraction, haunted local attraction here in Vegas, and they have a whole like satanic scene set up. And I was talking about the symbols and what they mean. And while we were shooting the episode, and if you guys are able to watch the episode, you'll see this. Aaron's phone goes off in his pocket. He has an iPhone, and Siri starts talking in his pocket. It was very muffled. And I looked at first. I thought there was somebody talking in the room while we were shooting, and I'm like, "What's going on?" And then Aaron's like, "No, it's my phone." And he took his phone out, and on his phone, written out, typed out, Siri says, "Did you accidentally summon me?" Now, at the time, I was like, "Wow, that's really weird." Then I'm like, "I don't know, maybe somebody set it up to make it better. I don't know." But so we shot the episode. We did the whole thing. The only people who knew about that were the like 4 or 5 of us that were in the room at the time, which was myself, Zach, Aaron, Billy, Jay, and stuff, right? So we knew that it happened. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about what happens on the show until it airs. Well, fast forward about 4 or 5 months, 2 days before that my episode airs, I'm in doing my show in the museum, and this lady's Apple phone lights up, and I could see it because she's directly in front of me. And she looks at it, and she made a weird face. She showed it to her husband behind her. He makes a weird face, and I asked her, I'm like, "Hey, are you okay? Do you guys need to leave the tour?" Because sometimes emergencies happen, and people have to leave for, personal reasons or whatever. They got to catch a flight, anything. And she's like, "No, look." And stranger happens to her. Her Apple Watch says that while she's in the room with me. And I would be the only person in the entire museum that would understand why that meant anything. So there's an interesting, fun story that you guys might find interesting, I guess.
Just a little comment for you guys. So I'm not saying it's paranormal or anything, but since John's just started talking about that, the computer kind of messed up. But anyway.
So funny story about stuff like that. So my producer, who produces my podcast show, we go over, and the first day I met with him, we were in there, and we were talking about, like, well, what kind of show do we want to do, and all that kind of stuff. And while we were in there, it was funny, he told me, he was like, his computers, after I left, started acting weird. Every time I've been to his place and I talk about paranormal stuff, weird stuff happens, like his TVs in his house got all messed up, stuff fell down, the computers just would shut down. Like right before my show, the computers all the sound got cut out completely. And we had to restart the computers and restart the show. So weird things like that have happened with me while I'm talking to people. Do I know if that's paranormal or not? I do not know. But I just know that it has happened more than once, and more than twice, and more than 6 times, actually. So, yeah, it's kind of funny you said that, because it's actually happened many times with me. And it's weird because, like, after I leave his house, he's like, I'll be in here, and then all of a sudden weird stuff will happen. Yeah. They actually caught a really interesting EVP during because he produces a couple of different shows in that particular studio, and one of the other shows, something weird got caught on microphones after the show was over. So I think they do like a sports show or something, and after they got done talking, the microphone was on, but the show was over, and he was still, he still had audio going through his computer, and then he had his headphones on, and he heard this weird sound, and he was like, "What the hell is that?" And then he clipped it and he sent it to me. He was like, "This just happened," and we've been trying to figure out what it says, but we don't. We can't really piece it all together. Maybe I'll send the clip to you guys and see if you guys can figure it out.
That'd be interesting. So if you, because we've got, like I said before, we've got a few people in the chat room who have been to the museum, sure, John. So I'm going to pass on a few comments to you, if that's okay. Yeah. So Stephen says, "The Devil's rocking chair and stairs from the Demon House I found the most intriguing." I'm losing you. I'm losing you. Right. Right. Okay.
Okay. I got you back.
Stephen says, the Devil's Rocking Chair and Stairs from the Demon House I found the most intriguing. Really felt some effects there, no matter how much of a skeptic I am.
The demon, so in the Devil's Rocking Chair is a really interesting piece. I remember when Zach first brought it into the museum, we had it like hidden in a part of the house because he was going to build the display. So that room where the Devil's Rocking Chair is was a different display at one point. And then when he got the chair, he was like, all right, I'm going to turn it into a display that just features the chair, and when people come in, it's going to be really cool. So the day that the chair was going to be put on display, before the people even got to the chair, this is the very, very first day they were putting on display. You can go online. This is Zach actually talks about this online, and you can watch an interview and stuff. It's very interesting. It's on E Entertainment channel. If you guys can, you can Google it, and you can actually find the interview with Zach where he talks about this. There was a group, so that the chair is actually underneath a stairway that comes down, and then you go into the room where the chair is and stuff, and then it's revealed to you. And so there was a group directly above the chair on the stairwell, and the people on the stair, the woman became very faint and collapsed. And then all of a sudden, it was really weird. A lot of the tour guides started crying in the house all at the same time. Like an overwhelming amount of sadness came through all of them. So that's one kind of weird thing. And that was on the very first day. They were opening up the exhibit to the public, and they wind up shutting it down the first day because it became too intense in the house. So then they had to stop that day and stuff and get everybody to kind of collect themselves again. Mm. Yeah. So that's a pretty cool thing. But you guys can actually go online and look that up yourselves. Zach talks about it on a TV show that he was interviewed when they came through and did a little thing in the museum.
Another one of Tiffany, she believes that Peggy has a couple of spirits attached to her.
I've heard that before. We've had some people come people who are like empaths, I guess you could say, or psychics and things of that nature. We've had people come through and state that there's like several different things going on with that one particular doll. I don't know that to be 100% accurate, obviously, because I don't know for sure, because I am not psychic. So I don't have any of those kinds of feelings, but I have been messaged by other guests and even stopped sometimes here at a local store. I was shopping with my girlfriend, and a lady comes up to me. She's like, "You're the guy that works at the museum." I'm like, "Yeah." And then she went on and on about like the weird stuff that she experienced, and Peggy always seems to be one of the more common things, especially people who are sensitive, I guess you could say. Have a lot of weird things in Peggy's room. Interesting. Yeah, the place is amazing, and right now, Zach is always trying to make it better, and it's one of the things I love about this guy is he spares no expense, and he just tries to make the best thing possible relating around this particular museum. And I try to also explain to people, a lot of people don't understand too, is it says the haunted museum, but not everything in there is haunted. Sometimes some of the stuff is just really cool, and he also collects a lot of really cool things, like the whole circus section. Like, obviously, circus tickets aren't haunted or anything like that, but they're just really, really neat, to have something that P.T. Barnum actually signed and used as a ticket to give to somebody to sit in his personal owner's box to watch the show is just a really cool thing to have on display. We have a lot of amazing antiques, but mostly everything in there has some kind of paranormal thing, but not everything. So I like people to understand that it's like, if you come, which you should, because the place is amazing, and even if you don't believe in the paranormal, you will still enjoy yourself, because the museum itself is so fascinating. The history of not just the building, but of all these things that Zach has purchased and gotten and taken in is quite amazing. And to have all that stuff in one place is pretty impressive. And the tour lasts about 2 hours. So you're there for a while. It's definitely worth the time and the money, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like 2 hours though.
No, it doesn't. It goes by really fast, especially if you're really into this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I went, they were like, the tour lasts about an hour to 45 minutes, and like we were there for like 2 hours easily, and we got done, and I'm like, what were we in there for, like an hour? And they're like, no, we were in there for 2 hours, and I was just like, holy shit, this is great, and I feel very fortunate that Zach believed enough in me to bring me on board to work with him, not only in the museum but also on the show a couple of times. And stuff, and he, I can't say enough good things about him. He's a super nice guy, and he tries to put out the best product, and with just authenticity and being genuine. And he's not a guy who sensationalizes things. He just, this is what happens, and he's very excited about this kind of stuff. So he's very passionate. Like pretty much everybody who works at that museum is very passionate about this kind of stuff. And you can tell it's a weird little family, but it's a family nonetheless.
Yeah, you can tell, like, we've spoke about the museum a lot on this radio, and we've been there. Like, you can tell the amount of time and passion Zach's put into the museum as well.
Yes, I mean this is his baby, and we're actually, he's expanding the building right now. He's in the process of building a whole nother section onto the museum. So he's putting even in more stuff in it, and then also improving certain areas and changing stuff up. The museum. The great thing about this museum is, like, it's not just here, and every time you come, you're going to see the same thing. Every time you come, you're probably going to see a lot of new stuff because he's constantly adding new things. I mean, it never it's never going to be the same all the time, and that's one of the great things I love about it. And then, of course, during October, we have the special events on the weekends, which if anybody ever gets out to Las Vegas during October, I encourage you guys to come down and check out the museum. The line is a little long sometimes because a lot of people, want to come in October, but it is worth the wait. It is worth every minute you will wait. And there's a lot of extra stuff going on outside. We have all kinds of really cool circus performers doing fire breathing and sword swallowing and all kinds of great stuff outside, and clowns and creepy characters and all kinds of great stuff outside. So you're not bored while you're there, for sure.
And if you get bored, there's something wrong with you.
Yes, there really is, because it's like, you're definitely going to be waiting in line for a little bit, but the line has entertainment. So you're not going to be like just left there like staring at each other, for the entirety of your wait. We have these really great big TV sets outside that play episodes of Ghost Adventures, and so while you're online, you can watch some things, and then when you get inside, there's another TV while you're in the lobby while you're waiting to take your tour. So we try to keep it, the line as entertaining as possible until you get inside, and then obviously the big show starts once you're on the inside.
Yeah. So we're gonna have to end the show now, John, because we've gone a little bit over anyway, but it doesn't matter. So before...
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. So before, obviously, I cut this show and go off air, would you like to tell anybody where they can reach out to you if they wish to?
Sure. I mean, you guys can find me on Instagram. It's John Shaw Magic, JohnShawMagic. You can find me on Instagram, and you can find me on Facebook just under John Shaw. I mean, I have all my links and all that kind of stuff are all kind of attached. So if you find me on one, you'll find me on all of them eventually. But I'm pretty easy to come by. And if people who are listening to the show want to ask questions, I absolutely will answer everything online. And anybody sends me anything, it might take me a day or so to get to some of the stuff, but I absolutely will answer as many questions as I can. So if anybody has anything they want to ask me about anything involving the museum or Satanism or my experiences with anything, it doesn't matter. I'm open to talk to anybody at any time. So feel free to contact me.
So I'd like to personally thank you for coming on, John. It's been a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll be getting you back on sometime in the future.
That sounds fantastic, and hopefully when this is all done, you come back and visit us here in the States.
Yeah, and before I end, guys, thank you everybody for tuning in and being in the chat room. Join us next week.